Serious? Concealed carry permit users who have pulled your firearm. What happened? Some guy opened the door and got into the passenger seat of my car while I was sitting at a red light while driving through an industrial area of my town late at night. I had just dropped off a friend at his work on a night shift, so the doors were unlocked. Older car, no auto locks. He was going across the crosswalk and veered off to the side of my car when he got to it, then opened the door and got in. I had started drawing my gun as soon as he changed direction at my car, so it was out and ready when he got in. He turned toward me to say something. I was pointing the gun at him, and I said, "What the frick are you doing?" He stammered something unintelligible, got out and ran off. He might have mistaken me for someone else, like a Lyft or Uber or something, but I wasn't about to sit there and wait to see what his intentions were. Nobody got carjacked, mugged, and nobody got shot, so it all worked out in my opinion. One time, I was picking up my sister-in-law from work and she gets off late. Snow had blocked the road to her workplace, so I parked right down the street, maybe 25-30 yards away or so. She texts me that she was coming out, so I started to look in that direction. She came out and started to walk toward me when a guy came out from a nearby alleyway and tried to take her backpack, but ended up tossing her to the ground. Took my gun from my car holster and ran to her. He was on top of her trying to take the bag off when I shouted that to get off her or I will shoot. He took one look in my direction and ran with nothing, tripping over some snow as he went along, grabbed my sis-in-law, and got in my car. Took her to the ER for some stitches since she hit the pavement pretty hard. We did a police report, but don't think they ever caught the guy. God dang, that is terrifying. Your poor Sil. We have a gunsmith shop. I was alone in the shop doing book work. I'm a woman and not a gunsmith. When some guy came in, trying to look in cabinets, touching tools, etc., and asking what guns we sell. I repeatedly told him we only repair build guns and he needed to leave. He was getting agitated and I was getting annoyed. I pulled my weapon out of the holster under my desk with one hand and called the sheriff with the other. The idiot told me I couldn't shoot him because I didn't rack the slide. I asked him if he was willing to find out. He stammered a bit, then took off. Sheriff picked him up 30 minutes later peering into a neighbor's house. He was a M-head and known well by the sheriff. Way out in the country. Neighbor lives a mile or so down the road. I was frankly shocked the sheriff was able to arrive so fast. For your information, my gun always has a chambered round when the shop is open. Too isolated and too many M-heads in the area. I clear it and lock up gun and mag at the end of the day. In 2 years, I've only drawn it twice. The idiot told me I couldn't shoot him because I didn't rack the slide. Low lead at this. Thanks. Was about to leave the house. 3rd floor condo with central private courtyard, when I heard screaming. Looked down in the courtyard and saw a guy dragging a girl with his arm around her throat. Ran down the stairs and came out right in front of them. She was slumped to the ground and he was behind her with his arm around her neck. She had one forearm between his arm and her neck so she could still breathe. She saw me and screamed, "He's trying to kill me." I yelled at him a couple of times to let her go and got no response, so I drew my pistol and told him I was going to shoot him if he didn't let her go. I didn't want him to drag her into the condo he was trying to get her to. He did comply at that point and quickly left the building. My wife was watching from upstairs and had called 911 to fill them in. I holstered and covered before the cops arrived and luckily knew one from where I worked. The girl had meanwhile jumped in a car and left, but the guy's mother lived there and came out. After all the parties were contacted, it turned out they had issues with DV before. No issues from the cops on my end. Filled out a witness statement and got my gun back and went on about the day. Years ago I stopped at a rest area along I-59 in Alabama, very late at night. I had gone to the restroom and was walking back to the car. The path back into the parking lot wasn't very well lit and went through a bit of wooded area. As I walked through the darkest part, a man stepped out of the trees and fell in behind me, following about 15 feet back. I was about 100 feet from my car, and I could see that there wasn't another one parked near it. Every hair on my neck stood up. I walked straight toward the car. Guy kept following me and didn't say a word. I don't know what he had in mind, but I assumed it wasn't good. I had a Browning .380 auto in and inside the pants holster. When I got about 15 feet from the car I pulled it out. I took about 2 more steps and then turned around and walked backwards until I was against the car door. Whatever the guy had in mind, he decided otherwise. He stopped, turned on his heels, and hauled butt back up the path. I got in the car and headed on down the road. I hope he didn't stick around and try to harm anyone else. This was in the days before cell phones, and I sure as heck wasn't going back up the path to find a phone. I wasn't CCW at the time, but I was open carrying while working at a gun store. Otherwise I wouldn't open carry. When we closed at night we locked up and left together. No exceptions. So we are standing at the door while the manager is kicking it and a car with the lights off comes rolling up to the door. They started to roll the window down and the guy closer to the car drew his gun, followed by the rest of us. The guy didn't think that rolling up to a dark gun store at night with his lights off to ask if we were still open was a bad idea. A guy at the range where I lived almost got ventilated because he walked up to the counter, reached into his pants, and pulled out a loaded pistol. Apparently it was jammed and he needed help, but man, there are way better ways to handle that. Okay, so I'm not a concealed carry permit holder, but my husband is. We were on a trip for a wedding and stopped in New Orleans for a couple days for some downtime. While we were there we got turned around after leaving a restaurant and were kind of lost. We were on a road a couple blocks from where we had started, so decided we would try and go back there and start over. We only had 2 drinks each with dinner, so we weren't drunk but pretty relaxed. 2 guys approached us with knives drawn. One was like a camping knife and the other was a decent sized butterfly knife, and said hands up, so we did. The main guy said for me to get my husband's wallet and give it to him. My husband concealed carries at his back, so I pulled his gun. Pointing at them was enough and the main guy said frick, and they both ran off. My husband was really proud of me, and I'm glad I didn't have to shoot anyone. I think we both handled it a lot better because of being relaxed from the drinks. Normally I think I would have been freaking out. This is my favorite one. I'm proud of you too, and I don't even know you. I grew up near some fairly rural places. I was out on a work call in one of these said rural places. I'm on a dirt road just big enough for 1 car each way in the woods. The big butt truck comes up behind me and starts flashing lights and honking. I pull over as much as I can without going into the ditch that ran alongside the road. Dude blows past me and gets maybe 200 feet in front of my car and pulls over. By the time he pulled over I'm moving again. I drive past him. Windows blacked out and the truck is idling. I get a few feet in front of him and he starts it all over again. We do this dance 4 times. He gets on my bumper and goes nuts. I let him go and then he gets right behind me. Eventually I have enough of this. I put my gun on my hip visibly and step out of my car. If this is going to end badly I want it on my terms. He turned around when he saw me step out, so I'm facing the front of his truck. I put my hand on my gun so it's super obvious what's about to happen. He sees me gun, turns around again and drives off. I'm not sure I would have been able to shoot at him, but I'm super glad I had my gun. For some reason during that entire read I imagined this big butt truck as an unmarked 18-wheeler with payload. Few years ago a new tenant moved into a house 3 houses down from me. She was a 4 feet 8ish 90 pound lady with 2 massive ABD very aggressive pit bulls that had to be deprecated from each other due to violently attacking each other. These 2 dogs would growl and snark at everyone that walked by. One time the pit in the front yard got through the fence and out in front of me in the street. This tiny lady cone running out right as this dog starts charging me. I don't know how, but she barely got that dog under control. I told her clear as day, if this happens again and this dog gets in range to hurt me, I will shoot it. She screamed and cried and called our neighbor who is a sheriff. He sided with me. He had video of the attack and other incidents of these dogs. Well, long story short, about a month later this dog gets out and charges me and I shot it. Seconds later the second dog come through the fence. I shot the dog as well. I promptly call the sheriff's office, explains what happened. Few seconds later the sheriff Psych comes running out as he heard the shots, looks at the dogs and says I'll call the owner. Ended up not getting in any trouble due to security footage and witness from the sheriff. The lady moved out about 2 months later. I still feel bad about shooting those dogs, but there was zero chance I was going to allow 2 120+ dogs rip me apart. Don't feel bad. Those dogs could have and probably would have fricked you up. It's the crappy owner's fault for raising such aggressive dogs. One time, my wife and I were walking in the downtown of our small city to our car in a paid lot. A group of guys in a car began following us and saying profane things to my wife in another language I happen to speak. We got to our car and they blocked me in. One of the guys got out and approached my wife's door, so I also stepped out and pulled my gun on him. He got back in without a word and they sped off. Another time, a drunk high dude jumped the fence into my backyard. I pulled my AR out, shined the gun light in his eyes, and told him I was going to shoot over the sound of my barking dog, which my wife was trying to hold back. The guy ran off. You should have let the dog bite his nuts. I was waiting in a supermarket parking lot in our car while my wife was picking up some groceries. I had the door unlocked because I was expecting her back any moment. Some very drunk guy just got into the backseat and was laying down. He smelled like liquor. I asked him what he was doing and he responded with incomprehensible rambling. In a firm voice I told him he needed to get out. He refused and continued with his incoherent rambling. He then put his dirty shoes up on the seats of our brand new car. He refused to leave and even started kicking the door handle. He was a pretty large man, so dragging him out would have been very difficult and risky. At that point I pulled out my Glock 19 and pointed it at him. He very quickly got out and sprinted away. He was surprisingly well coordinated for a person who seemed so drunk. Well, I'm not sure about you, but if I'm drunk and don't quite know where I am, having a gun pointed at me in an unfamiliar vehicle would probably get me sober enough real quick. Didn't draw but was open carrying and at the ATM getting money to pay the sitter after an evening out and dinner. So it's dark, around 9:30 PM or so. As I started working the ATM, my spidey sense started going off. I glanced left, saw nothing, to the right, and something was amiss. I stopped looking for detail and started looking for movement. I saw a dark silhouette of a person sneaking along the wall. The ATM was lit up like the noonday sun. So I took a half step left, made sure that my firearm was plainly visible, and continued my transaction, while paying attention to the guy trying to sneak up on me. When he got close enough, he realized I was armed. His eyes got huge, he bolted away, and every couple of steps, glanced back to see if I was chasing him. It's a bad idea to approach someone in a skulking manner at night, specifically staying in the shadows. Doing that means you have ill intent. The fact that I'm a 6 feet 2 inches 250 pounds male did nothing to discourage him. I'm glad I was armed. My spidey sense started going off. Always trust your spidey sense. Your gut feeling only cares about saving your life and it's often right. We travel up to TN from FL to a friend's cabin about every other year. This cabin is about a 20-minute drive off the main road. We stopped at the gas station at the main road and I noticed a couple of methed up kids watching us. We were in a big white van that looked like a church bus. 2 families and the van full of all our stuff. The cabin is on a lake and we were on a 2-week vacation. On the way up the road I see these guys are following us, so I pulled over to let them pass on this small road. They go ahead and stop in front of us, and proceed to get out of their car. They said they are looking to get to the lake and could they follow us. By the time one of them gets to my window, my gun is on my lap. He looks down and says, "Sorry, I thought you were someone else." They turned around and ran back to their car and went back down the road. I never leave home without it. This story really makes me wish we had state-to-state reciprocity. I travel a lot as a musician and I just go to too many places with differing laws to carry. We've been in some really sketchy areas but thankfully nothing's ever happened. I carry a Ruger 9E handgun, walking across the street to a gas station at night like I did all the time, in order to pick up some drinks for the girlfriend and I. I've crossed the street and am approaching the building from its side, which has a small grass lot spanning from its wall to the sidewalk. I see a man peek around the corner, then come towards me. It is a Texas spring, so it's a good 85 degrees outside at this point, and he's wearing a hoodie with the hood over his head. He makes a line straight at me, so I turn right to go around him. No big deal as his path leads straight to the apartment complex gate and I was in the way. However, he turns and heads towards me again. I turn again to head the other way, getting a little nervous. and he changes direction again. I see he's got his hands in the pocket of the hoodie and is holding something long since I can make out a shape near the lump of his hand. We go back and forth until we are face to face, and he asks me for money. I tell him I have any. He insists in it and takes a step towards me. I reach back, lift my shirt and put a hand on the grip of my gun, and tell him I don't have any cash. He insists again, telling me that yeah you got stuff, and starts walking quickly at me with hands still in his hoodie pockets. I draw my gun, two-hand the grip and point it at the ground between us, and tell him this is what I got. His hands go up and I see the hilt of a large knife in his pocket. He backs off and leaves while I watch him, then holster the gun and hurry into the gas station to call the cops. They arrive and search the area for him but couldn't find him. If I didn't have that gun, I would no doubt have been robbed and gutted that night. At the time this happened I was living in M country. That changed what you're about to read from regular road rage jackoff to I might actually have to use deadly force here. A driver was aggressively tailgating me. He passed me and began brake checking me. When I exited, he swerved over at the last second. He got halfway up the ramp and stopped. There are now a half dozen cars stopped behind me and this nut job stopped in front of me. On either side of me are concrete construction barriers with no room to drive around this guy. He was bouncing around in his car by himself, like he was in an argument. I called 911. He gets out of his car, screaming incoherently and gesturing at me. He starts staggering towards me. I'm boxed in. Cars behind me. Can't go forwards. Can't go backwards. Can't go around. I was coming back from the range so I had my handgun. High point 40. Have at it, on the passenger's seat. I didn't want to escalate the situation but at the same time he clearly wasn't asking for directions. I pulled the gun out of the holster, took the safety off, and chambered around. 911 was arguing with me about my location. Evidently the exit number wasn't sufficient, so I just put the phone down on the dash. When he got to my car he started alternating between screaming and laughing. I didn't know if he was on M or PCP or something else. I didn't know if he was having a mental break. I didn't know if he had a gun. It's scary how fast panic shuts down your brain. How far would my round go? Would it penetrate those houses? Will I lose my hearing firing in a vehicle? What will happen to my eyes with the gun less than a foot from my face? Can I even aim like this? Will the glass deflect the round? My brain basically stopped functioning and went into a loop. Our brains go into survival mode in extreme stress situations and there isn't a whole lot you can do about it. It's part of the reason why trauma victims often remember specific smells or visual patterns or sounds but lack a coherent timeline of events. I just kept repeating that threshold over and over. If he punches the window, I shoot. It felt like he was there for an hour, but it was probably only a minute tops. I hope the other cars behind me saw what was happening. Eventually he got in his car and drove away. I was able to give 911 a plate and a description of both him and the car. The plate was stolen and nothing ever came of it. I moved out of the area years ago. The story has a happy ending, though. I've since replaced the high point with an M&P Shield 9. I had just finished grocery shopping after driving to Walmart after getting off work at around 3 AM. Walked out of the store and someone had broken into my car and was rooting through it. I casually walked up with the cart, pulled my pistol, and asked what the frick he thinks he is doing in my car. He spun around real quick and started stammering how it was his friend's car and his friend told him to come get something out of it. I made him turn his pockets inside out to make sure he hadn't stolen anything, told him to pick his crap up and get lost and next time someone might not be as kind as I was. Put all my stuff in my car and walked back into the store to tell the police officer I saw someone rooting through people's cars. Careful here. Not all states allow you to use deadly force to protect your property. This was clearly not self-defense and where I live you'd have your permit taken away for something like this. I didn't write or vote for the law. Sitting at home. Basement apartment. Upstairs landlords are away. Heard a thump and thunk that got my attention. Then a crash and breaking glass. I have never gotten my safe open as fast as I did that day. Call 911. Tell them I may have an intruder in my house. I go upstairs, start slowly moving from room to room. checking angles, telling whoever it is to make themselves known and come out hands up. Then I see the ceiling had collapsed in my landlord's living room and I slowly unclench my butt. PD and fire department came and checked everything, making sure the place was structurally okay, and we had a good laugh. But for those first few minutes I was absolutely terrified. You shouldn't clear the house by yourself. Stay put until cops show up. Worked at a specific restaurant chain, of which I won't name but is usually associated with cooking the Lord's chicken, haha. Anyway, I was the only shift manager at the time, and was a bit on edge because within 3 nights prior, 2 Waffle Houses and the local Walgreens were robbed right after closing, all at gunpoint, and 2 people had been shot, not fatally, thankfully. All were in walking distance of my job. So one night 2 guys stroll in at 9:55 PM. We close at 10 PM. I'm in the office counting a ton of cash from the day when one of my employees came to me and told me of 2 suspicious guys sitting in the lobby. Let me note that I had a problem with the owner of the store allowing me to safely concealed carry. He would rather us stare down the barrels than protect ourselves. So I just went quiet. A few of the others leaders were in agreement with me, so we just silently carried. We all were properly trained, so we weren't just trigger happy kids. Anyway, I head to the lobby as these 2 guys began to make their way toward our registers. At this point it's like 10:05 PM. As one got up from the booth they were seated at, I saw the grip of the pistol he had shoved in his waistline. Both had hoodies on. Instinct kicked in and I drew Ruger SR9C, as I instructed one of my workers to call the cops and have everyone huddle in the walk-in cooler and lock it from the inside. I gave a few commands for them to leave. The one with the gun went to grab it, and I fired. It connected in his shoulder. He went down and dropped the gun. I kicked it way out of reach and had both guys stay on their stomachs. Cops showed up shortly afterward. Found out that they were the 2 guys who had robbed the other stores later on. The next day, my owner was happy that I did what I did. I didn't try and be a hero. I didn't even want to be the hero. All I could think of was the high school kids I worked with. I really didn't want them to be hurt. As the manager, their parents trust me to keep them safe. That's all that was going through my brain. I was in a not so good area because going to visit my parents I had to stop for gas, and unfortunately that's where I ended up. Anyways, I had my wife and 6-month-old daughter in the car, and at a stoplight someone started approaching my car looking very hostile, scowling at me. I kinda just made a hand motion telling him to back off, and it seemed to make him mad, and he kept coming at my car and reached into his coat pocket quickly. So I drew my pistol and he stopped immediately and backed up. By then the light turned green and I drove off. I didn't care if he had a weapon or not, but with my young child and wife I wasn't gonna take a chance. 2 situations. First, I've posted it once before, was back when all that evil clown nonsense was going on. My friend and I were driving in his truck along a well-lit 4-lane road one night. A car with 3 people dressed as clowns with 2 brandishing knives began to attempt running us off the road. My friend turned on the dome light and held up his custom-built .223 for them to see. They slammed on their brakes and took the next road and left our sight. Second, I was sleeping in my room one night and woke to the sound of someone quietly moving about my house. Instantly I was awake with my Glock 19 in hand. I keep it by my bedside for this purpose. After clearing the main rooms in my house with the weapon pointed down, I turned to the hallway where there was an L-turn and heard a voice say, "Captain Jack De Niro, don't shoot me, it's friend." It turned out that he had been working late nearby and called my roommate to see if he could stay over. It scared the crap out of me that I could very well have shot my friend. It reinforced my idea that I should always keep my weapon down for the sake of having time to identify my target. That and have a weapon light targeted is extremely important, as you see. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.